Hi, I'm Martin from Reedsy, and today I'm talking about a literary technique that writers can use to create tension, make their plot twists land, and turn their readers into active participants. And that is foreshadowing. As with all important videos, I like to start by pouring myself a fresh cup of black coffee and putting on my lucky white shirt. With that out of the way, what is foreshadowing? It is a suggestion or a promise of something that is to come within a story. From my 30 seconds of Googling, I couldn't find a clear derivation of the term itself, but I imagine it's something to do with weather, right? You're out in the fields tending to your sheep and suddenly the shadows of a cloud come looming over. It's a sign of a storm to come. In storytelling, it's very much the same thing. They're hints and clues the writers will drop early on about things that will happen later in the story. It can have a number of effects, but for me the most important ones are the fact that it creates tension that keeps the reader turning pages. It sets up your major plot turns so they feel inevitable rather than arbitrary. They can direct your readers' expectations in a certain way, either to be delivered or subverted, and they can turn your readers into active participants rather than passive spectators. Now this can all feel a little bit high level, but I'll go through these one by one and give you some examples of each, pick apart their effect, and show you what I think the author intended by their use. 1. Create tension that keeps readers turning pages. Perhaps one of the most important things that foreshadowing can do is to create tension. They plant a seed in the reader's mind that will grow and grow until it pays off. Very often, this sort of foreshadowing, especially in early scenes, will give the author some leeway to do some narrative table setting. It lets them show the reader the ordinary world of the story with the explicit promise that if you just hold on for a little bit, something exciting is going to happen. Let's take the opening of Suzanne Collins's The Hunger Games. When I wake up, the other side of the bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. So this is a little vignette showing our main character waking up. We learn that she lives with her mother and sister, that they are probably poor because the rough canvas covering the mattress. Her sister has just had a bad dream because of, gasp, the reaping. It's a name drop of something unfamiliar amongst all these other familiar details, signifying its importance. We're being told that this is not a normal morning. As the scene progresses, we learn a little bit more that the reaping, whatever it is to happen at 2 o'clock, and there it is, a ticking clock is set. And ticking clocks almost always create tension, which in turn makes the reaping feel like an even bigger deal. Now my other point is that this introduction of the reaping allows Collins to introduce the world of District 12, of Katniss and her friends and relationships, without it all feeling like an obvious info dump. Because we're seeing it through the lens of welcome to this strange world on a day when something even stranger is happening, we're giving our narrator a reason to actually describe all the mundane details of her everyday life, and giving a reason for you, the reader, to be interested. 2. Set up major twists so they feel inevitable. In a way, foreshadowing is almost sort of a narrative cheat code, allowing you to have big plot turns without it all feeling arbitrary. The thing that you're trying to avoid as modern storytellers is this deus ex machina, the god from the machine, where everything's going along and things are getting worse, and suddenly some surprising thing happens that resolves everything. It's incredibly unsatisfying unless you're an ancient Greek. Now, one of the most famous ways to think about this idea of planting something at the beginning that pays off at the end is Chekhov's gun. The idea that if you show a loaded gun in Act 1, in Act 3, it has to go off. For example, if you remember the film Aliens, near the start, Ripley shows that she's capable of operating a powerlifter, this futuristic forklift type thing. Then, an hour and a half later, at the climax of the film, when it's just down to Ripley and the alien queen, Ripley emerges with the powerlifter, and she's an absolute badass with it.
Get away from her, you bitch!
And it gets a pop from the crowd. Nobody wonders where it came from, whether Ripley's going to be any good with it, because we've established that earlier. So as I said, it can be a bit of a narrative cheat code. If you need something big to happen at the end of your story, go back and lay a bit of groundwork so it doesn't seem like this strange coincidence. Of course, this type of foreshadowing is often done in a very heavy-handed way that telegraphs exactly what's going to happen next. The best plot twists are always surprising, yet inevitable. The key is always to foreshadow something in an interesting and memorable way that doesn't look like a blatant wink at what's to come.
Fresh cup of black coffee, lucky white shirt.
When Ripley and the powerlifter are first introduced, we as the audience accept that this moment exists to show us who Ripley is, that she's just as competent and capable as the Space Marines.
Where you want it?
Because it's a moment with its own setup and payoff, the audience won't necessarily think that it's something that will re-emerge in the third act. So, introduce it early, make it its own self-contained thing, and bring it back later for maximum impact. 3. Direct your readers' expectations. A lot of the time, you might not want the foreshadowing to be forgotten. You want it to be something that sits under the narrative, something that the reader is aware at every step of the story, informing how they interpret every action. Let's go back to Chekhov's gun. In particular, I want to talk about The Seagull, his play in which a gun is introduced in the opening act, and indeed goes off in the finale. Treplev is a young playwright at his uncle's country home. He has written a new play that he plans to stage for the assembled party, including his mother, a fading stage star, and her beau, Trigorin, a famous and successful writer who Treplev looks down on for being middle-brow. Anyway, Treplev is infatuated with his young star, Nina, a girl who lives across the lake who dreams of becoming an actress. Early on, Nina describes herself as a seagull, a free and innocent creature, full of romantic ideals about art and love and the theatre. Because this is the title of the play, we understand that this is a critical metaphor. We don't know what it means right now, but things will become more clear as the play progresses. Then, the playwright Treplev, who's deeply insecure, shoots an actual seagull and presents it to her in this bizarre, grand romantic gesture. At the time, the audience doesn't necessarily know how to receive this, but we understand that it's important as well. It reframes that central metaphor of the seagull. Perhaps it is no longer a symbol of freedom and innocence, but something vulnerable and fragile. Something that could be killed, stuffed, and put on display. So now as an audience we are primed. Every time Nina talks about freedom or innocence or art, or her feelings about Treplev or Trigorin, the other playwright with whom she has an affair later on, whenever any of that comes up, that earlier image of the seagull being shot, killed and stuffed comes back to our mind. This brings up some questions in the audience's mind. Will Nina, our seagull, be killed in some metaphorical way? Will she have her dreams crushed? Or will Treplev's obsession actually turn violent? Because of the presence of the gun and the seagull, the play never really lets you relax about her fate. Then in the final act, when Treplev takes his own life with that gun, that earlier foreshadowing suddenly snaps into a new shape. The threat that has been hovering over Nina becomes in the end a threat to Treplev himself. So this kind of foreshadowing isn't about hiding clues for a plot twist. It's about directing the reader's expectations, either to meet them or subvert them. Even when nothing bad has happened yet, the reader will carry with them this sense of where things are heading, and it will colour every scene that they read. 4. Turn readers into active participants. This idea of dropping clues and making readers wonder what's going to happen next is such a powerful tool. These days there are readers out there who prefer stories with absolute certainty. I'm not saying this in a judgmental way necessarily, but there are some people who won't start a book unless they can be 100% sure that it has a happy ending. And in that way they find comfort in understanding the patterns and rhythms and tropes of simpler stories. They enjoy the simple foreshadowing of, oh, we saw a picture of our hero as a child in a dance competition at the start of the story, so we'll probably see them dancing again before the thing's done. But I think there are still many readers who don't just want to be taken on a ride, but enjoy playing story detective. Modern readers are all really savvy. By the time you're 18, you will have absorbed thousands of hours of storytelling through books, films, TVs, TikToks, and they've internalized a lot of those narrative patterns, even if they couldn't name them. So whenever they're reading a story, there's always this part of their brain wondering what could be happening next. And as a writer, you can play with those expectations. One example of this reader as detective foreshadowing can be found in Harry Potter and the Prison of Azkaban, a book written by a very normal, non-problematic author. Early in the book, we're told again and again that Sirius Black is a mass murderer who betrayed Harry's parents. The narrative drops small, unsettling clues: his escape from Azkaban, the way people react when they hear his name, the repeated warnings about how dangerous he is. The story is clearly training us to expect a confrontation with this villain. But if you're paying close attention, there are these little inconsistencies. Certain characters behave in a way that don't completely line up with the version of the story we've been given. Professor Lupin, the kindly new teacher, reacts differently whenever Black's name is brought up, suggesting that he might not be as terrifying as what everyone says he is. This isn't proof, but it's enough to make the attentive reader uneasy. You start thinking, hang on, what if this isn't the full story? What if we've been pointed in the wrong direction? When the reveal comes that Sirius hasn't been a traitor all along, it can feel surprising. But it doesn't feel like the authors cheated, the clues were there all along. The book trusts the reader enough to plant them there and let us quietly assemble this alternative theory in our heads. With good stories, our enjoyment as readers isn't always about just watching a story unfold. We're being asked to spot patterns and test theories and mentally try to get ahead of the plot. And when the story finally does catch up and we learn the truth, it's so much more satisfying because we've been an active participant in this all along. So, to wrap this up, foreshadowing isn't just one neat trick, it's a range of tools that could be used in different ways depending on what you're trying to achieve. At its best, foreshadowing can build tension that pulls the reader forward. It can make big plot turns feel earned rather than random. It can quietly steer a reader's expectation of where the story is going, and it can invite them to become active participants, spotting patterns, forming theories, and engaging more deeply in the story. And of course, the tools that you can use can take many different forms. Foreshadowing can be overt, like prophecies, ominous opening lines, side plots, and even a narrator explicitly hinting at what's to come. It can also be subtle, things like changing atmosphere and tone, and small details that only click into place later on. It can show up through objects that gain new meaning when they return, recurring symbols and images that shape how we read a character's fate, or even just the way that a scene is framed, making us feel from the very start that this isn't a normal day. Now, if there isn't enough foreshadowing in your first draft, don't worry. Most of the time, you won't know what to foreshadow until the thing that is foreshadowed has already shadowed. Your ability to go back and add these seeds could be your key to unlocking the story and helping everything click into place. If you've enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more content just like this. Until next time, see ya.